Thanks for being here. Come stand up. Take a few moments and refresh the way that you know yourself in standing. And pay particular attention to the kind of effort that you're using in order to stand, where you actually feel muscle engagement. It could be useful to close your eyes if you're not doing that already. And get a sense of how you know how tall you are. What gives you a sense of your height from the top of your head to the soles of your feet. Take a little walk around and see if you can get a sense of the muscular action that you experience in order to walk and not fall over. Sense your back. How do you sense your legs? And how do you observe your own attention? Is your attention divided? And then file that information away and come lay down on your back and watch where your attention goes. So this week's inquiry is if we took a fraction of the amount of attention that we give to our phone and we put that attention on our sensation. To me, it seems like we would turn into a generation of superhumans. We'd be acutely aware of so much interference and unnecessary strain, fluctuations in our thinking. Now see how your attention recognizes the shape of yourself on the floor. It's likely that you see some parts of yourself with much more clarity than other parts of yourself. So consider yourself simplified into 5 basic lines. One line goes from the tip of your tailbone along the curve of your low back, curve of your middle and upper back, curve of your neck, and stops at the back of your head. So take a moment and see which part of that line is the clearest in your sensing. Notice when your attention flickers away. Don't force yourself back. Give yourself time if you need to flicker and think about something else for a while. If you feel a hungering for some sort of instant gratification, recognize that. And then you can think about maybe coming back to this extremely simplistic focal point, one line along the back of you from your tail to the back of your head. And you can add layers to your experience of that line. So you can notice that if the changing of your breath has an influence on the position of that line and the pressure of that line on the floor. You can see if settling your eyes back more toward the back of your skull helps you clarify any part of that line. Do a really gentle movement of turning your head left and right. How is it to split your attention like that? To the feeling of the back of your skull rolling, your eyes resting back, and a sense of connection between that movement and this line of your spine. And leave your head quiet and travel your attention down your spine to somewhere at the bottom part of your spine line where you can draw a line from your spine across the back of your right hip and continuing down the back of your right leg to your right heel. Feel the change in the contours of that line, the pressure of that line. Do a tiny movement of your ankle, flexing and lengthening your ankle, and see if you can follow your attention from that micro movement of your ankle joint up the line of your right leg to your spine. Again, observe if you feel a need for more stimulation, a sensation, a resolution, a gratification. And then just come back to the possibility of being curious of the delicate feeling of moving your ankle and a new understanding of how your parts are connected together. And then bring your attention to the junction of your right leg line and your spine. And from that junction, draw a line in your sensing across your left hip and down to your left heel. And see what is different in the way that you feel this line along the back of your left leg. And play with a little movement of flexing and extending your left ankle and see if it's easier or more difficult to get a feeling of connection through your leg from your ankle. And how high up your spine is there a little resonance of that movement? Can you sense your two leg lines and your spine line simultaneously, splitting your attention? And draw your attention up toward the top part of your spine line and see where could you draw a line from the top part of your spine that goes over the back of your right shoulder and down to your right hand. Notice the weight and the length of your right arm line. The parts of it that are clear in your sensing, the parts of it that are less clear. Could you do a micro movement with the knuckles of your hand? Just a bending, slight bending and unbending of the knuckles of your right hand, and how far up the line of your arm toward the line of your spine could you feel some kind of connection? And then bring your attention up your right arm line to your spine line, and from your spine line across the back of your left shoulder, down the back or the side of your left arm to your left hand. And notice the weight and the length of this line. Do a micro movement of your left hand and listen for the influence along your left arm line. So the improvement of how you organize yourself for movement as a whole starts with the details. So now shift your attention back to your 5 lines simultaneously and see the way that you appear to yourself in your sensing along the whole backside of yourself. I encourage you in this lesson, as we start to play with movements that are maybe a little bit bigger or challenging than usual, that you do your best to remind yourself the essence of what we're doing is not mastering any particular movement. It's about improving the way that we feel differences and improving the way we feel connections. It's a certain kind of brain mastery, not movement mastery. So, bring your attention back to your right leg line and bend your right knee, drag your right heel until your right foot is standing, and then straighten it out again. And see if you can feel how this movement is affecting the position of your spine line. And this links into what we were doing last week when we were looking at the movements of the pelvis influencing our spine and improving the suppleness in our chest. So see, as you're bending and unbending your knee, if you're not already, bend your knee so that it's looking at the ceiling the whole time. And then when you re-straighten it, keep your knee looking at the ceiling. right? And feel how that is on your back. For some of you, you might feel how that is on your shoulders or even your chest. And you can frame it in terms of how your right leg line is affecting your spine line. Then leave your right leg line quiet and do the same movement with your left leg line. Bend your left knee so that your left knee keeps looking at the ceiling as you stand your foot. Keep your foot somehow in connection with the floor the whole time and re-straighten your leg. And what's it like on this side? Is it somehow easier or more difficult to do this movement on this side? Do you use yourself in a different way? And a funny question that you could ask yourself is, do you feel that you're using the front of you or the back of you to do this movement? And then leave your left leg line quiet and see what happens if, as you're bending and unbending your right leg line again, you let your knee point comfortably to the right as you're bending your knee and bringing your foot to stand. And then you let your knee fall out comfortably to the right as you re-straighten your leg. So your knee is on a different trajectory, the movement's the same. And see for yourself what kind of difference that makes in your experience of your spine line and maybe even your arm lines. Leave your right leg line quiet and try it with your left leg line. So you point your left knee slightly out to the left, then drag your foot to standing. And reverse it the same way. Let your knee fall out a little bit to the left and straighten it. Take note of the way that you shift your weight against the floor. And then make it your own and see if you can find the way of bending your knee that creates the least amount of strain or effort through your back, your abdomen, your chest, your shoulders, even your neck. Do a little bit of research on your own. Leave it, take a little rest for your brain, a rest for your attention, with your legs long, your arms by your sides. Then choose the pathway of least resistance to bend your knees and stand your feet. Put your left ankle on your right knee. With your right hand, you're going to put your right thumb between your big toe and your second toe, and your other 4 fingers will be on the top of your foot. Try to hold on to your foot with the least amount of effort in your hand and in your wrist. Of course, as always, make adjustments as you need so that you're not straining. So if your pant leg is easily reachable for you, then have hold of your pant leg instead of your foot. Otherwise, your thumb is between your big toe and your second toe. Your 4 fingers are over the top of your 4 toes. And then do a really gentle movement of lifting your foot away from your leg and bringing it back. And you see which direction your knee points when you lift your left foot. Does it make a difference in how easily you can lift your foot, depending on if your knee is a little bit more toward you or away from you, a bit more to the left or to the right. Keep your foot lifted away from your right leg and bring your foot and your leg a little bit to the left and to the right. Now, can you do that movement and bring back the framework of your 5 lines? And listen for if there's any effect or influence on your spine line as you are changing the position of your left hip joint by moving your left leg left and right. Move your left leg in any way that feels interesting. And then pause, stand both your feet for a moment. Listen for any differences that you feel along the line of your spine. Any difference you feel in the pressure of each of your standing feet. And then again, same position, put your left ankle on your right knee. Again, with your right thumb between your first and second toe. And put your left hand behind your head. Let your left elbow rest on the floor. And now, as gently as you can, do a movement of tilting your 2 legs to the left and to the right. Your hand stays attached to your foot stays attached to your right leg. Then you do a tilting movement of your 2 legs so that you can feel the pressure change on the back of your pelvis. What do you notice about the feeling on the back of your pelvis? Is there any point along that rotation that you kind of like the feeling? Notice how your attention is moving. Okay, now leave all that, lengthen yourself out, bring your arms and legs down, and check the way that you feel yourself making contact with the floor. Compare the way that you feel your left leg line and your right leg line. Observe the way that you bend your knees and stand your feet. And then put your left ankle on your right knee again. Put your left hand behind your head and hold on to your left foot the same way. Now lift your foot away from your thigh and get a sense of the shape between your left thigh, your left calf, your left foot, your right hand, your right arm. Think of the shape that your left arm is making behind your head. Point your left elbow toward the ceiling and see if you can do a very delicate movement of pointing your left elbow toward that space, toward that gap that you're making between your left leg and your right arm. So lift your head very gently so that your elbow points in the direction of the gap. And also lift your foot so that the gap gets a little bit closer to your elbow. And every time you bring yourself back down again, can you actually take a pause so that things don't become automatic? You can feel the release of effort, and then you can determine the next time you lift up, is there a way to do it with less effort? What's a useful thing to do with your breathing to support the kind of bending that you need to do in order to lift your head? Does it work better to fill your chest with air or to empty your chest of air? Does it work better to clench your teeth or to soften your mouth cavity? And keep in mind that your objective is not to excel at this movement. It's to feel more parts of yourself. Okay, and then pause a second, stand both your feet. And then set yourself up in the same position. Put your left ankle on your right knee. Put your thumb in the space between your big toe and your second toe. Hold the rest of your foot from the top. Put your left hand behind your head. So imagine that you have a stick between your elbow and your left knee so that the distance stays consistent. When you lift your left foot and you lift your head, there'll be a distance between your head and your knee, right? Keep that distance and bring your knee and head more forward and bring your head and knee more back without holding your breath. It's a funny game in which you learn how to move from the back of you as opposed to just controlling things from the more familiar front of you. Can you feel how you change your pressure along your back ribs? Right. Of course, you take pauses when you need to take pauses, and then if you feel refreshed, you can come back and see if it can be fun. Let it go, lengthen yourself out. See how your attention can fall on your 5 lines. Now, as you lay there, could you imagine yourself maybe as a baby or a small child? Maybe never. Maybe someone else's baby or small child, but play with the image of how it would be if you could actually lift your leg behind your head. And then bend your knees, stand your feet, put your left ankle, again, same leg, on your right thigh. Put your left hand behind your head. Hold on to your left foot the same way. Explore what it's like to lift your left foot up as you bring your elbow into that gap between your left leg and your right arm. And see if you could allow yourself to roll a little bit. Could you think of somehow massaging along the back of your pelvis, your low back, back of your ribs? And keep pointing your elbow in through the space, in through the gap. What are you doing with your spine line? Of course, you're bending your spine line somewhere in order to lift your head. And is there any other movement of your spine line that's possible? Maybe not so elegant or sexy or graceful, but maybe possible in a comfortable, easy way. And then just pause a moment. And then you're going to play with it again, but this time, what if it's your head? What if you were going to put your head through the space between your leg and your arm? How do you use your back when your intention is to bring your head into the space, bring the space to your head? Is there anywhere that you're complicating things? Straining in your hand or in your ankle in a way that actually makes lifting your head more complicated? And then play with it a little bit. Play with the feeling of rolling, play with the feeling of lifting your head. Okay, let it go. Lengthen yourself out again. Listen for any changes. Go back to the very first movement with your left leg and just bend your left leg to stand your foot and then straighten it again and see what that's like. And then bend your 2 knees, stand both your feet, put your left ankle on your right knee. Thread your thumb up between the space between your big toe and your second toe. Let your left knee move away from you and toward you, but keep your left ankle on your right thigh. And if you go slow enough, then you might notice that there's a change in the shape along the right side of you. What kind of influence does this movement have on your spine, on your pelvis? And then can you add into that movement of your left knee? And as you bring your left knee to tilt toward you, can you bring your right knee to tilt to the left? What do you feel on the left side of you? Can you make the movement slow and delicate enough that you can be able to sense the parts of yourself that don't show up as well in your sensing, parts of you that might be interfering. You notice a rigidity in your abdomen, in your in your right leg, your right chest or shoulder. And then again, a few times, lift your left foot up a bit toward the ceiling and bring it back. Feel how that's coming along. Try it a couple times again with your left hand behind your head, pointing your elbow into the space. Notice how that is feeling. You can lift your foot enough to increase the space and point your elbow into that space. And then, as always, you want to be where you are. Moving on is completely useless if there's any sort of tension or confusion where you are already. So if this happens to be a movement that comes easily to you, then you might start to investigate how it would be to have your left hand on your left thigh through your legs. And when you lift your foot and your head, as though your head was going to go through the gap, could you slide your left hand down toward your left bum? Your hand is through the space between your hand goes through the gap. So you're going to slide your hand into your back pocket on the left side of your bum. And your head is moving in the direction of the gap, and you're bringing the gap closer to your head. If it feels useful, you could, again, maybe even if it doesn't feel useful, you might surprise yourself. It reminds me of sometimes when Esther has her big revelation moments, when she finally just lets it go and boop, something happens. So it could be something like that. Whereas you're lifting your foot and you're lifting your head and you're sliding your left arm between your legs, you might spontaneously roll a little bit, and that might spontaneously allow for a little bit more of a connection between your left leg and your head. Okay, let it go, lengthen yourself out, give yourself a nice rest of your attention. Of course, if you have even the slightest bit of achiness anywhere, it means you're definitely working too hard. But what's the image of yourself that you have? Does the image of yourself get skewed when you feel dissatisfied? Or when you feel satisfied? Okay, so let's do a little micro exploration on the other side, just so you're not walking with a limp for the rest of the day. So bend your two knees, stand your feet. How quickly we forget to feel our pelvis when we stand our feet, huh? Put your right ankle on your left knee. Put your left thumb up through the space between your big toe and your second toe, with your other four fingers over the top of your four toes. And start the story at the beginning. First, the question is just the way that you can feel yourself in this position. So how is it to lift your right foot, bring it back down? How is it to move your right foot left and right? It might turn out that this hip joint is a lot more permissive than the other hip joint. And what kind of influence do you feel on your spine line as you do these little micro movements of your right foot? You could maybe unbend your knee a little bit, reach your right foot a bit toward the ceiling and bring it back onto your thigh again. Again, not at all testing your range of motion, not trying to stretch. Trying to bore yourself as much as possible. Okay, and then keep your ankle resting on your knee, keep hold of your foot, but tilt your two legs left and right. Go slowly. What's wrong with moving really slowly? Do you like that feeling in the back of your pelvis and your low back? You could even keep your legs crossed, but rest your arm for a second, rest your brain for a second. You can uncross them if you prefer. Just pause for a moment. Put your left ankle on your right knee. Oh, sorry, your right ankle on your left knee. Hold on to the bottom of your right foot. What do you feel along your waistline when you start to move your right knee away from you and toward you? Along your thoracic spine, your ribs, maybe even your shoulders. Can you go slow enough with this movement that when you bring your right knee toward you, you can tilt your left knee to the right? What's different about that? Why would that be its own variation? Can you feel the difference? Can you feel what that feeling is? So you've directed your attention to a particular part of yourself and a particular set of functional relationships. And then you see how your brain can process that information. Put your right hand behind your head and point your elbow, lift your head and point your elbow through that gap between your left arm and right leg. Lift your right foot up away from your left leg. So you bring the gap toward your elbow and you bring your elbow toward the gap. And think about how you could use the back of you. How do you lean on the back of you so that some parts are heavier and some parts are lighter, as opposed to tightening the front of you or lifting, hoisting the front of you? And then try that funny variation where you keep your head and your leg lifted. Feel the distance, again, this idea of a stick between your right elbow and your right knee, but then lift and drop the same amount. So bring your right knee and your right elbow the same amount forward and then the same amount back toward the floor. The same amount. So if one of the parts of you moves easier than the other part, even it out. But beware, it's not an abdominal exercise. Don't tighten the front of you to do it. Find the back of you, right? Where do you bend your spine in order to lift your head? Right? It may not be that much. Okay, and then just pause a second with both your feet standing. Bring your arms down. It could be interesting to play with the movement in your imagination. Imagine holding your right foot. Imagine what it would feel like if you were to bring your head right through the space of your left arm and your right foot. Do you imagine yourself rolling as you're doing it? Do you imagine yourself on your side, bringing your leg behind your head? How do you imagine yourself doing it? Again, this is not your objective, but it's a concept, right? So again, see how it is to hold on to your right foot with your left hand. Put your right hand behind your head. Play with letting yourself roll along the back of your ribs as you lift your head toward the space and bring the space toward your head. Let yourself have a little fun with it. If you aren't breathing freely in and out, you're straining, right? You're overworking something. Where do your foot and hand need to be relative to your head? Are there options there? Yeah, are there possibilities? Exactly. What happens if you roll to your right or you roll to your left? And I don't know, you see for yourself. Is it easier for you to imagine bringing your elbow toward the space or to imagine bringing your head through the space? Pause for a second, have your 2 feet standing, and bring your right hand onto your belly. And then with your right hand, just slide, just as you are with your feet standing, slide your right hand along your right thigh and toward the inside of your right thigh. And notice that even though that's a movement of your hand and your arm and your shoulder, at some point as you're reaching, you can also start to integrate the whole right side of your back in some way. And then reach your right arm along your left thigh, the front of your left thigh, the inside of your left thigh. Can you integrate your arm into your back, your right arm line into the line of your spine? Okay, and then just pause for a moment. And then one more time, put your right ankle on your left knee. Hold on to the bottom of your right foot with your left hand. Have your right hand reaching for your left thigh. And as you lift your head through the space, reach your right hand along your inner left thigh toward your left bum. And then see if you can have your right hand reaching toward your right bum as you lift your head and your foot. So your shoulder starts moving in the direction of your right knee. Your right knee moves in the direction of your right shoulder. And your foot keeps lifting as your head is lifting. Mm-hmm. And you allow yourself the possibility of falling over. And although it might feel nice to massage your butt with your hand, can you feel what is the function? What happens to your right shoulder and your right upper back as you're lifting your head and your left foot toward each other? And then let it go. Lengthen yourself out on the floor. Feel your contact. Notice the kind of attention. And see once again the way your 5 lines show up in your sensing. The line that goes from your tailbone up the back of your pelvis, your low back, your middle and upper back to your neck, back to your skull. And from the bottom of your spine line, how do you experience the lines of your right and left leg? Going across each hip joint down to each heel. And from the top of your spine line, going across each shoulder, down each arm. So for the overall sense that you get of your height, how long you are on the floor. And how heavily you can rest yourself down onto the floor. And then when you're ready, transition back to standing and give yourself a couple moments to see how you are in standing. Notice the kind of effort that you use in standing. See if you can notice the back of you. And then as you're taking a walk around, see what that's like. I hope there was something fun or interesting there to set you up for your day or your night. And see you next week.